Hello, you have reached the Gator at Defiance Illusion. Back at you tonight. I've had some people ask me about wrestling, and I've had some discussions with those styles about wrestling. So I'm going to get on here and talk a little bit about wrestling, if that's all right. Back in the 70s and 80s, we had guys like the Mass Superstar, Superstar Bill Graham, Superstar Bill Dundee, Ric Flair, Rowdy Piper, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Adrian Adonis, um, Dutch Mantel, Steve Kern, oh Lord, Austin Idol, you know, Steiners, they were more 80s. I think my favorite wrestler of all time, besides, of course, Ric Flair, would probably be the Masked Superstar. He never got the notoriety he should have, but he was out there with guys like Boogie Woogie Jimmy Valiant, Jerry the King Lawler, Bill Dundee, Ric Flair, Ole Anderson, Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, when wrestling was more wrestling before it became gymnastics and ballerina, like it is now, thanks to certain individuals. I prefer the old school wrestling. This lucha hombre crap, I don't like it at all, where they jump off buildings and land on you on the table. I mean, to me, that's not even entertainment. That's just stupid. Some people might find it entertaining. I don't. And I didn't like it also when after WCW it became so vulgar that literally you really didn't want a child to sit down and watch it no more. I mean, I remember watching wrestling. I guess it was Memphis wrestling, and we had a real big aerial, real tall, I should say, not like huge, but it was like 35 feet in the air or something. I don't know. And my father had it hooked up, had a real big aerial on it, and it was automatic. You could turn the thing, and it would turn the aerial to where it would receive in, and we could actually get in on Saturday morning, Smoky Mountain Wrestling and Georgia Wrestling. So we would sit down for like 2-3 hours every weekend, me and my brothers, and we would watch these wrestling shows. Now, you gotta understand, when we was watching Smoky Mountain Wrestling, we was watching guys like Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee. And they all mixed and mashed and swapped wrestlers and stuff, between alliances at that time as well. But Smoky Mountain was pretty much, Bill Dundee, Jerry Lawler, and Steve Carnes, Yogo Yamamoto, and Fuji, and I mean, a lot of them guys came out of the Smoky Mountain area. And then you had Ric Flair. He lived over towards Charlotte, so of course he was more of the Atlanta, wrestler. But he did come up through Smoky Mountain too, as did Tully Blanchard and Ole Arn and Gene Anderson and all them. In fact, Gene Anderson and Ric Flair really had a go around there. Got really bloody. Bad go around. It got real. It always gets messy amongst family and all that. But when they start talking about tag team wrestling, I definitely have my favorites, but then I have my picks for the best. Brain Busters, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, definitely within the top two of the best of all time. And then Hart Foundation, that would be the two that I juggle. Bret the Hitman Hart with Anvil Neidhart. Everybody says, "Oh, about the British Bulldogs." They were kind of catered and made up to a little bit too much, and they kind of lost credibility when one of the Rougeaus knocked Danny Boy's teeth out for real. Um, After he'd been bullying him for months, and the wrestlers all knew it, the industry knew it, and all the fans knew it, and it finally came down. And he lost a few of his teeth, got his teeth bashed out. In fact, they talk about it on an interview if you ever pull up on the YouTube. Um, we also watched Billy Jack Haynes, great wrestler, man. I mean, great, great wrestler. But my one of my favorite wrestlers was the Masked Superstar, and he did so much for the industry. I mean, the guy was just pivotal, and he always tag teamed up with either Ric Flair or he would tag team. And I'm talking about early Flair, way before the Four Horsemen. Um, but the Masked Superstar, I mean, they were putting him up against guys like Andre the Giant. He got a little comical with it, when they done certain things, and a matter of fact, most people don't know this. The first person to do that piss you off strut that Ric Flair used to do when he knocked somebody down was actually the Superstar Bill Dundee. He was the one who actually started the strut thing, and that's real talk. I can remember, and then Flair kindly mimicked that. And then, you had guys like Tommy Rich, which the Masked Superstar just ripped. I mean, oh my God, Masked Superstar tore him up. And then you had the Super Destroyer, which was also a masked, and they were very similar because the Masked Destroyer had a big star on his head, where the Masked Superstar just had a bunch of little stars around a crown on top of his head. So it was quite different. And, the one thing I can say is the Masked Superstar never lost his mask. All the other wrestlers in the industry lost their masks except him. He was and they say to this day, Eddie was a real badass, for real. He didn't put up with nobody's stuff. That was the guy when you went backstage, you shook his hand. You didn't try to piss him off or play stupid games with him, man. He gets you. There was a story of, I believe it was, what was his name? Dirty Dick Slater. And Sting had given Slater's fresh ex-girlfriend, they just broke up, gave her a ride to the next town because she had to perform as well. And she was a beautiful black woman. And Dirty Dick Slater and her had broke up, and Sting gave her a ride to the next, just to the next town, just being a nice guy. And he walked in the locker room, didn't know anything was even going on, and everybody just got quiet. And this is what I've seen them talk about on YouTube. But they said that Sting got his head stuck in a toilet from a guy that wasn't even half his size. Slater was a badass, another badass. But they say the baddest one of them all was Tonga. He was tough. Other great tag teams that were bigger tag teams were like LOD, Demolition, which actually was the Masked Superstar, was it Crush? Yeah, I believe it was Crush. That was actually the Masked Superstar without his mask on. A lot of these guys did Japan tours, and they, that's when they would kind of disappear for a couple weeks or whatever. They go do a Japan tour, and they made a lot of money doing that. They made more money in Japan than they did here. And when it came time to bring the Four Horsemen in. It was actually, if I'm not mistaken, it was Arn Anderson that started it. And if I'm not mistaken, also, Tully Blanchard at that time was the world champion. But somehow, between all of them, they had decided that Ric Flair, because of his look and the way he carried himself and the persona, and he'd been a world champion before so many times in different organizations, and his work ethic, that he would be the flagship. So what they'd done was they took the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, which was Ole and Arn. They added Tully. Tully lost the belt, or had to put the belt down. Ric Flair ended up picking the belt up a few weeks later. And I remember the time when the Four Horsemen literally held the World Championship with Ric Flair, the tag belts with Ole and Arn, the Intercontinental, the Intercontinental at one point with Tully Blanchard, and Tully Blanchard also with the TV title. They had all the gold in the Four Horsemen at one time. And that made a lot of wrestlers mad, and they were complaining, and a lot of people were threatening to quit, go to other places because they didn't feel that was right to have one organization. But that one organization put the NWA on the map when the other guys couldn't do it. And that's how I look at that. Rick Steiner got his break in the NWA, I believe, as well. And there was Dr. Death, Steve Williams. God, that guy was brutal. And he was one of my favorites, too. I mean, Dr. Death was something, man. God, I could just keep on going. There were so many great wrestlers back then. Now they're all, it's just all Hollywood. But back then, they spilled like gallons of blood. I mean, it was crazy, what they did for the company. But yeah, make comments. Tell me who what wrestlers you liked, who you came up watching. You may say somebody I don't know nothing about. You never know. Because everybody lived in different areas around the United States. Everybody had different wrestlers, Roddy Piper, he was up in Portland. I couldn't tell you a thing about Portland, Oregon, up in that area. But I know he was up there for a while. And he got his start with Ric Flair as well. Flair was one of the original tough guys. And he really fit in well with guys like Buzz Sawyer and Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson. Ole Anderson, he was a workaholic. You got to give Ole. Ole was a tough one. There's stories about him that make your blood curl. He was a tough dude, for real. These guys were really fighters. They could go, they could fight anywhere. They could fight in a bar or anything. They really messed people up. There's all kinds of stories about the Legion of Doom. The Four Horsemen came to Dayton, Ohio back in late 80s. They got into it in the middle of the Holiday Inn, I believe it was. They tore that bar up pretty good. The women were more real back then, too. You had Wendy Richter in the WWF at that time. WWE, if you want, or whatever. I care less. But, Wendy Richter, man, she was, wow. And, but I never really cared for the whole Hulk Hogan thing, good or bad. I knew where he came from. I knew who he tapered himself off of, and that was superstar Bill Graham. Bill Graham was the original Hulk Hogan. And most people don't even know that. You know, when I think of Hulk Hogan, I think of Superstar Bill Graham. I don't think of Hulk Hogan. Nothing against him, just never was my cup of tea, you know. Um, and what I'm about to say is going to be very unpopular, but pound for pound, the best wrestler of the day was Chris Benoit. Steroid rage and that many concussions, he lost his mind and did what he unfortunately did. You know, God forgive him. It's terrible. But, you know, then there was other tragedies such as Owen Hart. I mean, we lost Owen Hart, Chris Benoit, British Bulldog, which that was just absolutely stupid how we lost him. Jim the Anvil Neidhart's gone now. I mean, the only really, you know, and Stu Hart's gone now. The only surviving Hart is Bret, and he had a stroke. So I mean, yeah, them guys are all gone. You know, thank goodness we still have the original Four Horsemen around. You know, last time I saw Lex Luger, he was in a wheelchair, unfortunately. Sting's still performing semi. You know, he's not performing nothing like he used to back in his day, of course, but he's still semi-performing. Terry Funk, he was another one that could really throw down, but he got on people's nerves. That's why his character didn't become bigger than it did, because once he got mad, he would have a tantrum and start throwing just throwing things and falling over stuff stupidly. And that's why his character didn't go further than what it did. I mean, him and Flair had a good run. Another one that had a great run with Flair was Steamboat, Ricky Steamboat. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, baby. Yeah. The Hawaiian Kid. Man. Great wrestler. Oh. The women went caca over that dude. And they used to drive Flair crazy for real. There was a lot of jealousy there, because Flair had the pretty white hair and he fluffed it up all the time. You know, it was the early 80s and stuff, you know, late 70s, and that was all in. You know, bell bottoms were still in, plaid suits were in. I mean, oh my God. I forgot all about that plaid suits. And I remember watching Ric Flair walk out on set with a plaid suit on, and it was blue. My uncle got married to my aunt in the same suit. True story. Not like the same suit, but the same suit color and everything, but different. But yeah. Wow. Memory lane, man, memory lane. But it was a real pleasure to watch guys like the Masked Superstar, Boogie Woogie, Jimmy Valiant, you know, Superstar Bill Dundee, Jesus, Jerry the King Lawler. I used to like Tommy Rich until he turned heel. He made a heel a real heel. He made you want to hate him. He was just wow. And it's a shame the way he turned out. It really is. But he had a real problem with Masked Superstar, man. I guess they really got at it one time, and you know, you can tell when wrestlers really got at it back in the day because of the wrestlers. And I saw this with Kevin Sullivan during WCW with Brian Pillman, which is also dead. And he came from the Hart dungeon and all that, and he's gone too, unfortunately. God rest his soul. But Brian Pillman and Kevin Sullivan got into a real altercation in the middle of the ring. And Tony Schiavone was even like, "Ooh, oh my God." You know, I mean, Bobby the Brain Heenan was speechless. I mean, and that was amazing. Because Heenan, he was the ultimate announcer to me. Bobby the Brain Heenan was the ultimate commentator. I mean, he was the perfect and great manager. And some of the best matches I ever saw. I'll go back to the Kevin Sullivan thing in just a second because I just grabbed a hold of something else in my mind. Some of the best matches I ever saw was Bret the Hitman Hart taking on Mr. Perfect. You talk about flat out wrestling. I'm talking high school all the way to college, all the way to professional. I mean, they did it all, man. And that was Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig taking on Bret the Hitman Hart. That was some fine work. That was how you want to see your wrestling. I mean, it was up and down, back and forth. You couldn't tell who was going to win. They were just awesome together, and especially when they fought each other. But anyway, back to the Kevin Sullivan, Brian Pillman thing. They really got into it one time in the ring. It got so bad that when Kevin Sullivan got on top of Pillman and started he was full bore. I mean, just bam, bam, bam. And next thing you know, you see Arn Anderson run up and grab Kevin Sullivan by his hair and starts pulling. And then Hugh Morris grabs Pillman, because that was Sullivan's partner. Hugh Morris grabs Pillman and slings him into the corner, and then he starts, fake hitting him, and you can see him like leaning into him, like, "Are you okay?" And then he slings him in, and you can see Pillman, he was just getting fed up at that point and ended up walking away. But that's when Pillman left WCW. The announcement was made. Pillman messed up. I'm not sure exactly what he'd done to the company, but he did something that royally pissed off Kevin Sullivan. And Kevin Sullivan was the booker at that time. You didn't piss off the booker, man. I mean, that's just like pissing off your dispatcher as a truck driver. You're not going to have a job long if you do that. Not saying you have to go along with everything that they say, but you got to meet them somewhere in the middle. Pillman wasn't known for that at that time. I don't know what he was going through. He just, he flipped. He went nuts for real. I mean, I seen him outside and a guy just wanted to take a picture of him, and Pillman took the camera and just smacked the guy upside his head with it. I don't know if anything ever came of that or not. But it was crazy, man. I mean, Brian was such a good guy, and all of a sudden he just turned like that, and he just ran up north to WWE and became a part of the Hart Foundation, and all that. And we know how it played out. So all of them are gone now except Bret. Every one of them. And Bret Hart, I would not want to, if I had to choose 5 wrestlers that were probably the best of all time. I'm talking execution wise, making it look real, making people feel it, getting people involved. And this is not in order of how I feel about them or anything, just naming them off. Bret Hart, Chris Benoit, Ric Flair, definitely. Arn Anderson, definitely. Masked Superstar, most definitely. These guys they got the crowd so pumped, and they didn't do that stupid acrobatic shit. Jumping off onto tables 50 feet away from the ring onto the floor, and then they're out of wrestling. You don't see them for 6 or 8 weeks because they got to recuperate from a back injury or something. It's stupid stuff, man. Stupid. It's not entertainment. That's just dumb. Don't even look real. Because I'm sitting there, as soon as they started that stuff, I started losing interest. The cage matches were fun when it had Masked Superstar or Ric Flair. Ric Flair made a cage fun, man. I'm sorry. Ric Flair made a cage fun. The thing that always pissed me off, there was a rumor that somebody had started when Bret Hart came south after the Montreal screw job. And he went to WCW, and he told everybody, right there in the middle of the ring, I'm going to WCW. Because he went like this, and he made the letters. And everybody knew what he was doing. But that was a horrible thing they did to Bret. But anyway, when he came to WCW, we loved it. Whoever the booker was for him should have been fucking fired. I mean, Bret Hart, okay. everybody don't hear me step out of character too much like I just did. Let me explain. There was a rumor going around that sparked a lot of interest and a lot of hope. And the rumor was because they fell one short in the Horseman. And no offense to Mongo, but they really didn't want Mongo because Mongo was not a wrestler and he was extremely hard to work with. He was a football player, you know, and he was stiff, very stiff. They still talk. He ended up doing pretty good, but I'm saying right off the bat, you know, they did. Bret Hart wanted, from my understanding, and this is just what I was told, Bret Hart, and I know some people in the industry too, from back in that day, Bret Hart was being slated to become a Four Horseman. Now, could you imagine Ric Flair, Bret Hart, Arn Anderson, and Chris Benoit? You would have had Chris Benoit and Bret Hart as the tag champions right off the bat. Arn Anderson taking back the television champion right off the bat, and Ric Flair, taking the world championship right off the bat, and James J. Dillon stepping back into the spotlight with the Four Horsemen at that point, or the late great Bobby Heenan, and becoming the Four Horsemen manager. Because Bobby Heenan was supposed to have managed the Four Horsemen when James J. Dillon was in the back being a bookie. And James J. Dillon wanted Bret Hart, from my understanding, to be in the Horsemen, and Bret Hart wanted to be in the Horsemen. But, and this is just the word that I got, I don't know how much truth there is to any of this, but they said the powers that be, and I'm not talking about Ted Turner because Ted Turner liked all of them, Eric Bischoff and them, was like, that will get Bret Hart with Ric Flair in the Four Horsemen. The NWO wouldn't even get a slot. They wouldn't even get a slot. And they were right. I mean, that's real talk, you know. Hogan and Savage would have ended up going back north at that point. Hart could have wrote his own ticket. WCW would have been dragging in 4 times what it was, which means Ted Turner would have definitely held on to it. And they were making good money when he got rid of it, but the Monday Nitro thing was taken over. It became a conglomerate that WWE became very interested in buying out. With some guarantees and some promises of mixing them together, bringing some of the Southern talent north, which Chris Benoit actually came from north. I think he's from Canada as well. Bret Hart as well, you know, but they came south. There was more money south, you know. But the problem was with Eric Bischoff and Russo, and everybody says this, and I can see it now looking back on it in hindsight. How are you going to have Ric Flair, one of the highest paid acts in the country? You're going to have Hulk Hogan, another very high paid act, and then you're going to have Randy Savage, another high paid act. On top of that, you got Kevin Nash, the Steiners, Bret Hart, the Four Horsemen as a whole. And then you got a bunch of little dweebs running around with masks on that are 4'2" and doing this lucha hombre thing, whatever they call it. And I'm not trying to be insulting. I don't know what they call it. That they do all them flips and stuff, and you know, a lot of that came from Japan, and you know, Thunder Jushin Liger and all that. And no, not my thing. If they would have straight up wrestled, Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like Dean Malenko. He was a very short guy for a wrestler. I mean, he was like what, 5'8", 5'9", tops, if that. You know, I mean, but very entertaining, and he held his own. You never seen him cry about nothing or anything. Um, Barry Windham was another great wrestler that was in WCW. Uh, but the problem was what they'd done in WCW was combined into WWF, WCW, NWA, and Smoky Mountain Wrestling all in one. And the leftovers from Smoky Mountain Wrestling went north to be in the WWF. Okay. WWF, they can say what they want. They talk about, oh, we was like this on Monday night. No, you wasn't. No, you wasn't. Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't given no. In fact, he got his beginning in WCW, and he couldn't cut it there because there was just too much old talent and new talent coming down the pike. And his slot with Brian Pillman, just the Hollywood Blondes, they just didn't pan out. As you could tell, I used to be a wrestling fanatic. But yeah, that was just Eric Bischoff and Russo, because it was Ted Turner's deal. They just started writing checks that they weren't getting returns back on. You know, Hulk Hogan comes in with Randy Savage. Randy Savage hands off Slim Jim, which gave a huge kick to the company. Granted, other people came back with their endorsements, gave a huge kickbacks to the company. Granted, but the problem was basically the NWO side. They wrote their own checks. You can't have employees writing their own checks, And I got that story. I've heard Dusty Rhodes talk about that. I've heard James J. Dillon make comments about that, and very likely other people make comments about that throughout the company. Ric Flair, he kind of tries to avoid that subject because that's a very sore subject for him. Man, and WCW was doing so good until Eric Bischoff showed up, and he started getting this power thing in his mind. Because quite honestly, he did not make WCW nothing. He was a good announcer, but he sucked as a bookie. He sucked. He was doing stupid shit, and he was just signing anybody from up north because he was in this competition with, the WWE and all that. It didn't even have to be like that. It never had to be like that. And Russo, he was an idiot. He did the stupidest stuff of all time. I mean, started ruining WCW, and then at the end, when Ric Flair called the ball down and said, F you all, the crowd went nuts. I went nuts. Everybody went nuts because we knew when they closed WCW down, that last time we was going to get to see some real wrestling again, even though if it was for the last time, and we did, And they closed it out with Sting and Ric Flair. I wish Harley Race would have been there. It would have been nice to see Flair and Race since they started the whole back and forth to begin with, the original. It'd have been nice to have seen them finish it. Or even Steamboat and Flair. Nothing against Sting. I like Sting. Like Luger. Like watching them get their asses kicked by Flair all the time. And when Sting was in the Horsemen for a short period of time, he really got hurt. They accidentally hurt him. He didn't get hurt. They accidentally hurt him when they were fake pulling him off of the cage, and Flair was, I mean, if he'd got up on top of that cage, Flair would have beat his brains out. He couldn't stand up with Ric Flair. There's no way. I mean, Sting's a punk compared to Flair. I'm sorry. I don't buy it. Luger couldn't take on Flair in real life because he was too robotic. And he telegraphed his punch. It was like a week, he's holding it for a week and it's coming. Just when you see it twitch, duck. And he misses, I mean, Luger, what a joke. But smart guy. I mean, and he was a worker. He was a talent. But the Horsemen, once they trained him, then it was a little different. It loosened him up a little bit. He didn't fall into the Mongo type of thing. Mongo never got that shot, to get that kind of training, in my opinion, because one thing, they were older. Another thing, they just didn't care because it wasn't the Four Horsemen for real with Mongo Air. It was more like just a patch for a tire leaking air. That's why they were wanting Bret Hart with Chris Benoit, because they lost Pillman because of internal problems with him and Kevin Sullivan. And then the internal problems bounced over from Kevin Sullivan to Chris Benoit. But the problem with Chris Benoit was he was so popular with the fans and Ric Flair and Arn Anderson that Sullivan couldn't just run him out. So there you go. But anyway, this is Gator giving you some of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Y'all have a blessed day, and we will talk to you another time. Please hit that like button, subscribe, tell your friends about us, and we'll do the same for you. God bless you. Have a happy holiday. Stay safe, and I'll stay Dayton strong. Peace out from the Gator Alley and Defiance Illusion. Good night, baby.